Premier Notley and the NDP caucus. What exactly is your plan with the carbon tax? Beyond a bunch of buzzwords and gobbledygook, I'm not entirely sure. Now, a lot of people in this neck of the woods simply see this as a tax grab on the backs of hardworking Albertans. I, as a believer in the potential of these technologies, want to believe this revenue will be invested intelligently, wisely, will diversify our economy in a meaningful way. I recognize the necessity of adopting these technologies today to supplement and one day to completely replace our fossil fuel economy, perhaps. Therefore, it is in our long-term best interest to start adopting these technologies, learn what we can, roll out what is the most effective. But just because I want to believe these things are going to happen, I'm not about to apply blind faith into my politics. So I have to wonder, do you really have a plan? Were you in such a rush to announce the closure of the coal-fired power plants at the Paris Climate Conference that no one in your government had any idea about the backdoor Enron clause? Doesn't seem like a government that's done its homework to me. Are you more interested in public relations than actual policy? I didn't mind the first time I saw the ad for the climate leadership plan. But guess what? I'm getting sick of it. We're all sick of it. The lady watering your roof, great, but I mean, 5 million on that? Because the changes are going to be so sweeping. Look, I'm not an opponent of reducing our carbon footprint and integrating renewables into our economy. Why would I? But the reality is that for the immediately foreseeable future, fossil fuels are necessary and really the only solution for long-term travel, like planes, trains, ships, and to some extent supplementing our electricity generation. For instance, even though we're closing in these coal-fired power plants, we were replacing with natural gas. While natural gas is, albeit cleaner, it is still a carbon emitter. So we're not out of the woods yet on that one. And I don't know, maybe that's a good step in the right direction. It's certainly better than coal, I suppose. But still not sure. I don't know enough, I'll be honest. And if you look at around other places in the world, there has been some good intention legislation passed, but with rather eyebrow-raising consequences. If we look at the use of wood pellets in Europe to supplement their coal use for power generation for a moment, wood from forests in the States are being turned to wood and being used as feedstock to fire their power plants. Now, they claim that it's generally the waste wood, the stuff that isn't used for lumber, but it's hard to say at this point because it is becoming more and more profitable for these ventures, perhaps. So I'm not positive either way. I don't know enough information. There is speculation that that could be the case. Anyways, this was done in the attempts of reducing Britain's carbon emissions by 20% with the use of renewable sources. Well, trees are a renewable source. Indeed, they'll grow back eventually, except that takes decades for a mature tree stand to renew. But ultimately, you're still burning something to reduce fossil fuels. Burning something to reduce fossil fuels. Think about that for a sec. Some experts assert that this is a greater carbon consequence for doing that so than using lumber for traditional means. When the carbon is used in conventional means like lumber for a house, the carbon that tree used to grow is sequestered, locked away into the wood itself. And so long as that home, apartment building, whatever, doesn't burn down, that carbon is locked away. Now, that's not the case when you're burning wood and sending it up a smokestack. So as we speak, a very robust industry is sending wood pellets from the American forests and being used to keep the lights going on in the UK instead of coal. Is this merely a stopgap measure, or has it been adapted as a long-term solution? Another example of good intentions having unintended consequences is windmill proliferation. In places like Ontario, for instance, there has been an enormous movement as of recently to stop the spread of windmills. The problem was that the rules were much too lax and allowed windmills to be placed within 550 meters of homes in rural Ontario. You generally don't hear the drawbacks of renewables, but they are real and they need to be addressed head-on in a meaningful way. Not just shoved under the rug and not dealt with. These problems can be addressed, mitigated, and possibly even eliminated, but we have to be real about the limitations of this technology. When this climate legislation was introduced in the Alberta legislature, opposition politicians fought to amend the legislation, and in the spring sitting, saying among other concerns that the tax needs to be revenue neutral, and the government needs to present studies on the economic impact of the tax, as reported by CTV News. This is something our neighbor Premier Christy Clark understands when implementing their carbon tax. But in the spirit of nonpartisanship, oughtn't you have considered doing a little bit more study and understand the ramifications of such legislation? Or are you just going to push ahead your agenda? I thought when you guys got voted in, your whole stick was you're going to consult the community more. Did that really happen in this case? It makes me wonder. When it comes to renewables, Alberta is uniquely positioned. We can learn from the mistakes of other jurisdictions have made in their implementation of renewable technologies before we move full steam ahead. I understand action needs to be taken sooner than later. Action needs to be taken today. But let's make sure we're doing it for the best bang for our buck, the Alberta way. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a confused Canadian. Thanks for listening. I'm Dustin Clark.